And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 9th day of May 2022. Well, I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, and of course, we know that this has been a big weekend with everyone celebrating or observing Mother's Day in some way or form. Well, right now, let's take a look at what else has been happening in the weekend. Well, as we know, there has been lots of functions and events that have taken place in the weekend, and we'll look at some of them today in this show. Well, of course, first of all, I'd like to really, congratulate and thank all the mums out there once again for that wonderful day. Well, to me, why should it be only one day? Mums' Day should be every day. Mums are always there, whether they are here, and for ones who don't have the mums in the world anymore, they should always be in your hearts. Live by their teachings, live by their legacy. We are what we are because of them. Well, right now, moving on with this, so of course, there's so much we want to talk about. I was privileged to be a guard of honor at the Brisbane Lions match, and what an experience that was, and congratulations to Tim from our White Ribbon, named as the community champion, and what an amazing feeling. And thank you very much to Caroline for helping us in that corporate box. Well, right now, let's move on with the show for today. Here's a little bit of a plug of what's going to come on. So at 10 a.m. today, we will have our guest speaker today, Raj Guruswamy. And of course, we know that he is from the multicultural community, but he is joined the One Nation Party. Strange as it might sound, yes, he has. What are the reasons? Why did he do that? All of that will be revealed only here on Australian Indian Radio at 10 a.m. So we're going to, find out all about that. Well, right now, the big debate, the big debate happened yesterday, the second Fury debate, in which it was said that, both the leaders were talking to each other, talking over the moderator as if they didn't even exist. No great policy or issues were addressed, but it was more shouting at each other. Well, here's that report on that big debate from last night.
Well, the gloves came off last night, Michael. Very different to the first debate that occurred a few weeks ago. That initial debate was undecided voters asking questions of the leaders, and really it was quite subdued, it was bland, nothing much came of it. This time round, it was journalists asking questions of the leaders, and there were a number of fiery clashes at sections. Both leaders yelled over the top of each other, taking over the debate, in fact, not listening to the moderator or the journalists, and instead just lobbying questions at each other. Now, those fiery clashes were over a number of issues that have dominated the federal election campaign so far, that being cost of living, energy policy, national security, specifically around that security pact signed between China and the Solomon Islands, also other issues such as aged care and housing. Now, there was a poll taken at the end of this debate. Channel 9 essentially allowed anyone watching the debate to vote, and the numbers kept changing, but in the end it was 50-50 in terms of who won the debate. There are questions around that process, though, with the polling. There are a few issues with it. So one could say no one really won the debate. There were no major gaffes, no major stuff-ups, but a lot of yelling. We didn't learn anything hugely new in terms of policy, but what we did see was a rare admission from the Prime Minister that he didn't really say the right thing during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's specifically around the vaccine rollout. We will all recall how many of us had to wait much longer than expected to get their vaccine for COVID-19. And last night, Mr Albanese asked Scott Morrison whether saying it was not a race was the wrong thing to do.
Isn't it a fact, Prime Minister, do you now accept that indeed it was a race and you should have secured vaccines earlier?
It was a race, Anthony, and we shouldn't have described it in those terms. But what we did do, working together and closely with the Chief Medical Officer at the time, who was Professor Brendan Murphy, is we were taking care to make sure that the vaccines that were approved in Australia were the right vaccines, and that I could confidently say to Australians, with the support of medical authorities, that they would be safe for Australians.
Now, Steph, one issue that's been discussed at length during the campaign is the establishment of a national anti-corruption watchdog, and that was debated last night.
Yeah, this came up around questions initially of corruption and then a question of, why do you both think that voters are disenchanted with the major parties? Now, Mr Morrison has made it very clear during this campaign that setting up a national anti-corruption watchdog will not be a priority if he wins government again. That's despite the fact that he made this promise prior to the other election back in 2019. Now, he blames Labor, saying that they're not supportive of his legislation that he's put forward. You do have to pick up on the fact, though, Michael, that, the government can change their legislation. They can negotiate as they do on other pieces of legislation in the past. But in this case, Mr Morrison is standing firm. And in fact, he is feeling the heat on that and instead then questioned Mr Albanese on exactly what his plan is.
You haven't allowed any debates on private members' bill.
Private members'
bill? Yeah, I
bill?
have, because previous
so you can do legislation. You just haven't done one for this proposal you're so excited about.
Previous governments, Scott, have allowed for parliamentary debate. We have got a plan, and I'll tell you what the plan is. It's a plan that you don't like, because what you want
is that the Cabinet has to decide. There's nothing on it.
Now, over to you, Tom. Anthony Albanese says he won't be giving a guarantee of real wages growth under a Labor government.
Yeah, good morning, Michael. Aside from all the shouting, there were a few policy tidbits along the way in this debate. And wages was a really interesting part of it. Of course, Labor has been saying for some time that it is much better placed to deliver significant wages growth should it win government. We've been pushing Anthony Albanese for weeks to get a bit more detail around that. First of all, can he guarantee that real wages will increase should he form government? And if so, by how much? What's the marker of success in that area? And we got an answer to at least half of that question last night. Mr Albanese was asked if he could guarantee that wages will go up, and he said no. He said that's not really a guarantee that he can make. It would be a very bold claim should he have made it, of course, because with forecasts of significant inflation in the years ahead, and of course so many wages forecasts having been missed over the past few years, it would be a pretty impressive commitment to make. But here's a bit of that exchange.
You can't guarantee that real wages will rise.
The difference between myself and the current government and Scott Morrison is that we will try to do what we can in measures and structures to improve real wages. We will support, for example, minimum wage increases. At the moment, this government won't even do that.
And Tom, finally, Labor has revealed a plan to lift the standard of teachers entering Australian schools.
Yeah, Michael, this is the biggest new policy we've seen from Labor in more than a week or so, about $150 million over 4 years to try and improve the standard of teachers entering the teaching system. The way they do that is by offering scholarships of up to $12,000 to 1,000 students a year. Those are students who are achieving an ATAR of 80 or higher to get them into teaching degrees. Labor says there's a lot of evidence this has worked quite well overseas, and it should work well in Australia too. They say the best way to lift education standards and students' education outcomes is to have better teachers entering the system, and they want teaching degrees to be considered similar to law degrees or medicine degrees as well. There's also a pledge in here for programs like Teach for Australia and Nexus. That's matching a coalition commitment that was made a few days ago.
So there you go. There's so many commitments that have been made, and teaching to be brought in line with a law degree. Well, let's see how that all turns out. Well, right now, what has Barnaby Joyce been up to during this campaign? What have we seen of him?
Get set.
It's a big country, and the Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce is clocking up a lot of kilometres traversing it. Take a look at everywhere he's going, and look at all the checks he's been carrying around with him. He's visited a lot of Queensland seats, including a fair few visits to the seat of Flynn. Here's where he offered $2.5 million for some new soccer club rooms. Here, $250,000 for the Gladstone Bowls Club. Further south, Barnaby Joyce has been visiting seats like Cowper. While he was there, he offered $5 million for a new veteran centre. And even further south to the seat of Patterson, on the outskirts of Newcastle, where $55 million were on offer for airport upgrades. Here's all of the media events we're aware of that Barnaby Joyce has had since the campaign began, right up to yesterday. And almost all of these events have been accompanied by a dollar figure. It's always difficult to add up just how much cash has been promised, because politicians often re-announce the same money over and over again. But being conservative, we've counted up more than $150 million worth of promises that don't seem to have been announced before. And you'll see he's spending most of his campaign north of this line. To be fair, most of the Nationals' lower house seats are in Queensland and northern New South Wales. That's also where Barnaby Joyce's personal support is thought to be strongest. But this line, 33rd parallel south, might turn out to be quite an important line in this election. The coalition's been facing difficulties campaigning on net zero north of the line, particularly in Queensland, with candidates saying things like net zero is dead. Inversely, south of the line, you've got voters who think climate action isn't strong enough, and that's helping fuel the rise of teal independence. Labor had similar problems last election, particularly when it came to climate policy. And the independent running in the Victorian seat of Nichols, on paper a safe Nationals seat, he thinks Barnaby Joyce is a net negative for the party in the south. You could call this the Barnaby line. Perhaps we should also be regarding it as one of the key geographical fault lines in Australian politics.
You are up to date on Australian Indian Radio, and of course, as I mentioned before, that almost every day this week our format would be the same. 9 o'clock news and 10 o'clock our specialty shows will be on. Well, right now tensions are resurfacing in the Liberal Party over that Religious Discrimination Act bill.
A Mother's Day spent in the warm embrace of his blue-blooded Liberal family.
Happy Mother's Day, Mum. Happy Mother's Day, Jen.
At a Melbourne campaign rally, Scott Morrison fires up the party faithful and MPs, including a marginal seat holder,
Katie Allen's here. It's good to see Katie.
Who's again threatening to vote against the government over a deeply held personal conviction.
And I will stick with my position because I believe in the protection of gay and transgender. Absolutely.
If re-elected, the Prime Minister says he'll push ahead with religious discrimination laws that several Liberal backbenchers helped to defeat in Parliament earlier this year. But he won't specify which legal protections would be strengthened to stop students being expelled from schools over their sexual orientation.
The point is, it doesn't happen. The religious schools themselves don't wish to do that.
The opposition leader says that amounts to a broken promise.
I'm astonished that he has walked away from that.
Campaigning in Sydney,
Beautiful day for Mother's Day.
Anthony Albanese's pledged to match the Prime Minister's $53 million promise to improve IVF access, while facing another day of questions over whether budget deficits would be higher under a Labor government.
All of our costings will be released as the opposition in the usual way. We don't know what the other side is.
This hotly contested election campaign has now entered its final 2 weeks, and from Monday, early voting opens across the country. Both sides believe record numbers of Australians have not yet entirely decided who they'll be voting for, meaning the next fortnight will be crucial to determining who wins government.
I'll decide closer to the election and wait until my wife tells me.
I'm not telling him my vote. I'm still deciding. I'm still quite undecided.
I don't know what to do.
Go on.
And both leaders won't be wasting an hour or a dollar.
You look so handsome.
Oh, you are a good man.
In the quest to win them over. Andrew Green, ABC.
And that's right, not a moment and not a dollar being withheld, and everything has been out there. A lot of promises to community organizations, sporting organizations. Well, of course, those are pro-election promises. The delivery and the deliverance of that will be dependent upon the incoming government, as the current government is in caretaker mode. Well, right now, the next news is the support for aged care pay rise, and the vote compass shows. What does it say? Where are we headed with that?
During the day, Carlton Williams works in aged care, providing support to people in their homes. It's a job he loves, but one that doesn't pay particularly well. So at night and on weekends, he works at a local pub.
I get paid more to pour drinks, take out food and wait tables than I do sometimes to, like, I guess, look after someone's life. Like,
Vote Compass asked whether the federal government should commit to funding a pay increase for aged care workers. More than 80% of voters say yes. There was support across voting intention, although that was stronger among Labor and Green voters. Women were more likely to agree, and while it was common among all age groups, sentiment was strongest amongst older Australians.
We're talking about roughly 200,000 Australian workers who are looking to get a relatively significant increase. The union movement would like them to get about 25%.
Unlike other parts of your body, you're likely to pick up the entire bill when it comes to looking after your teeth. Only a small number of Australians receive help through the public system, and wait times are usually long. Vote Compass asked whether Medicare should offer basic dental care to all Australians. The vast majority of Australians believe it should. Voters earning less than $1,000 a week were most likely to agree, and people are more supportive now than when we last asked in 2013.
Over the last couple of years, there's been this big discussion every day about public health, about prevention and things like that. And so I think that's why the public has come around.
Tell us what you think and see where you sit on the political spectrum. Go online and fill out Vote Compass yourself.
If you feel that way, please do go ahead and vote and put your vote on that abc.net.au/Australia votes. So, you know, you too can have your say there and see what's happening. Well, right now, let's go to the news coming out about the Taliban.
In cities like the capital Kabul, many women don't cover themselves head to toe. But for these women, that's about to change.
Humans are born free. No one has the right to talk about women's clothes.
First it was the closure of schools and universities, and now the decree of mandatory cover-up. Women who fail to comply could see their husband, male relative or guardian jailed for 3 days.
In Afghanistan, 99% of women follow the correct code. The other 1%, we request they implement this decree. This is not our order on women, but an order from the Quran.
This latest edict comes on the back of hardline new restrictions on women travelling and working. And teenage girls are still waiting for their promised return to the classroom.
The schools need to be open. There is famine all over this country. There are suicide bombings. There are so many other problems, oh dear God. Instead of looking after that, they're always after women.
Afghanistan is struggling with an economic crisis, and the Taliban regime is still subject to a raft of Western sanctions. The UN says the Burqa decree creates new strains in the Taliban's efforts to gain international recognition as the country's legitimate government. We're continuously losing hope since the Taliban returned. A bleak and uncertain future for women under Taliban rule. Jenny Lavelle, ABC.
So there you go, the Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Well, right now let's go to Ukraine before we go to our daily India report.
In farming and in life, it's said you reap what you sow. So when Russian soldiers took Ukrainian farmers' land, they got on their tractors and took their tanks. They're images that fill Alexander Shobina with pride.
We're all Ukrainian. We didn't go to them. They came to us. And this is typical of Ukrainian farmers.
Farmers have found themselves in the firing line during this war. Their grain storage facilities have been attacked. Shelling has left their green fields covered in craters, and some have even been mined.
Everything we're doing now is related to the war. We go to bed and we don't know if we'll wake up tomorrow.
Vitaly Kostricha grows corn, wheat and barley, but he can't even sell his grain at cost price, let alone make a profit, because Russia has all but destroyed Ukraine's export market. Its blockade of Black Sea ports is starving farmers of income and Ukraine of a big source of national wealth.
The attacks on infrastructure and the blockade on exports don't just hurt Ukraine, they hurt the world. About half the wheat bought by the World Food Programme comes from Ukraine, so Russia's war could have devastating consequences for those who can least afford them. Anatoly Husenko's son is on the front line while he's working on the farm. It's been hard to get enough workers, with people fleeing or fighting, and the curfew means time in the fields is limited anyway. He says it's a shame this fertile land isn't reaching its full potential. It's such rich black soil, he says. This land is his life, and it shows.
Do you think that people understand how important Ukraine is for feeding the world?
Now they do understand, he says. They may not have before, but now they get it. But farmers here aren't standing still. Vitaly, like many others, is donating his excess wheat to feed soldiers and refugees. It's milled nearby and taken to this old bakery, revived after 35 years just for the war effort. Its wood-fire oven turns out more than 250 loaves a day. Livestock is also being sacrificed. These pigs have been donated, and Alexander's team turns them into stew to send to hungry troops on the front line.
This is a struggle for all Ukrainian people against the invasion, and farmers can play a special role.
They know their land better than anyone, and if Russian troops try to take it, their tractors will be ready. Nick Dole, ABC News, Dnipro.
And there you go, that's the Ukraine. Right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and much more on India and the Indian diaspora. After returning from a trip to the 3 European nations and the Indo-Nordic Summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on 5th May chaired an important meeting to review preparations for the heat wave management and monsoon preparedness.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi stressed the need to take all measures to avoid deaths due to heat wave or fire incidents. During the meeting, Indian Meteorological Department and the National Disaster Management Authority briefed about the persistence of high temperatures in March to May 2022 across the country. Modi is said to have emphasized that the government needs to take all measures to avoid deaths due to heat wave or fire incidents. Officials said that Prime Minister wants to ensure that the response time towards any such incidents should be minimal. Modi stressed that in view of rising temperatures, regular hospital fire safety audits need to be done. Modi also spoke about the need to work to substantially reduce the vulnerability of forests to fire hazards, enhance the capabilities of forest personnel and institutions for timely detection of a possible fire and for fighting fires, and to speed up recovery after a fire event.
After a gap of 3 years, India's Jet Airways is back in the skies with their test flight.
Jet Airways took their first flight again on 5th May after a gap of 3 years. The airline had ceased operations in April 2019 after experiencing financial difficulties. A video has been shared by Jet Airways on its official Twitter handle, which shows the plane taking off. The tweet read, quote, "Today, March 5th, our 29th birthday, Jet Airways flew again. An emotional day for all of us who have been waiting, working and praying for this day, as well as for Jet's loyal customers who can't wait for Jet to commence operations again." End quote. This was a testing flight to ensure the aircraft's safety. The video has received over 1,000 likes and over 14,000 views on Twitter.
Former US Ambassador to India Richard Verma has been named by President Joe Biden to his Intelligence Advisory Board.
US President Joe Biden has named Indian-American Richard Verma, a former ambassador to India, to a White House body that advises the president on the effectiveness of the country's sprawling intelligence community. Retired Admiral James A. Sandy Winfield will be chair of the president's Intelligence Advisory Board. Janet Napolitano, a former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and Gilman G. Louis are members. The White House said the advisory board serves as an independent element within the executive office to exclusively to assist the president by providing him with an independent source of advice on the effectiveness with which the intelligence community is meeting the nation's intelligence needs and the vigor and insight with which the community plans for future. Verma is currently with MasterCard as its General Counsel and the head of Global Public Policy. He was sent to India as ambassador by President Barack Obama in 2014. He was the first Indian American to be named US Ambassador to India. He had earlier served in the State Department as Assistant Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to the Senate Majority Leader. Verma was an active member of the Biden's 2020 presidential campaign and led the team's outreach to the Indian American community.
India's Odisha state sounds a cyclone alert with 18 districts asked to take preventive measures.
Ahead of the formation of a low-pressure area in the Andaman Sea, the Indian state of Odisha has asked collectors of 18 districts to be prepared for a possible cyclone coming in from the Bay of Bengal. Special Relief Commissioner P.K. Jaina, in a letter to the district collectors, had asked to prepare in advance to reduce the impact of the possible cyclone. He has also asked them to regularly watch IMD forecast and warnings and directed the authorities to send a compliance report on the recommended measures with detailed information on arrangements made in their respective districts by May 6th. The IMD has informed the Odisha government that a low-pressure area is likely to form over the South Andaman Sea and its neighbourhood by 6th May under the influence of cyclonic circulation. The system is very likely to intensify into a depression in the next 48 hours and move in the northwestward direction. The IMD has also indicated that conditions are favourable for the formation of a storm next week.
After a brief respite from the scorching heat, the Weather Office warns of a fresh heat wave in northwest and central India.
The Director General of Meteorology at the Indian Meteorological Department, Mrityunjay Mohapatra, said on May 5th that a fresh spell of heat wave is likely to commence in some parts of northwest India and central India. Due to the presence of western disturbances over northwest India, the heat wave awaited in the past 2 to 3 days, with day temperature had fallen and is likely to continue for the next 2 days. However, a fresh heat wave spell may return in the Rajasthan state. Isolated heat wave conditions may be back in the states of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Vidarbha especially. The heat wave may also spread to some parts of northwest and central India after May 7th.
The revered Hindu shrine, the Kedarnath temple in the Himalayas, opened for devotees with the state chief minister offering prayers.
The Himalaya temple of Kedarnath opened for all devotees on May 6th with more than 10,000 pilgrims present when the doors of the famous Lord Shiva shrine opened after 6 months. Uttarakhand State Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami along with his wife offered prayers at Kedarnath temple. The temple opened with rituals and Vedic chanting besides being decorated with 15 quintals of flowers. Thus, the Char Dham Yatra kicked off this year with the opening of Gangotri and Yamunotri portals for devotees on May 3rd. With only the Badrinath shrine is yet to open, Uttarakhand government has announced that its Kapat will open on May 8. Char Dham Yatra commenced after 2 years without COVID-19 restrictions. Unlike last year, the government has not mandated carrying a negative COVID-19 test report or a COVID-19 vaccination certificate.
Priyanka Mohite has become the first Indian woman to scale 5 peaks above 8,000 meters after climbing Mount Kanchenjunga on 5th May 2022.
Priyanka Mohite from Western Maharashtra state has become the first Indian woman to scale 5 peaks above 8,000 meters after she climbed Mount Kanchenjunga on May 5th. Priyanka is the recipient of the Tenzing Norgay Adventure Award 2020. She successfully completed her expedition to Mount Kanchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain on the planet. In April 2021, she had scaled Mount Annapurna, the 10th highest mountain peak in the world, and had become the first Indian woman climber to achieve the feat. She also climbed the world's highest peak, Mount Everest, in 2013, Mount Lhotse in 2018, and Mount Magalwand, Kilimanjaro, in 2016. Passionate about mountaineering since childhood, Mohite started to scale mountains in Sahyadri range of Maharashtra as a teenager and in 2012 scaled Bandarpanch, a mountain massif of Garhwal division of Himalayas in Uttarakhand. In 2015, Priyanka Mohite scaled Mount Mentosa located at 6,443 meters, the second highest peak in Lahaul and Spiti districts of Himachal Pradesh. The Bengaluru-based climber is also the recipient of Maharashtra government's Shiv Chhatrapati State Award for Adventure Sports for 2017-2018.
Good news for all the Bollywood star Alia Bhatt's fans as she makes her Hollywood debut with Gal Gadot in May in the UK.
शक्ति, संपत्ति, सद्बुद्धि ये तीनों ही औरतें हैं.
So ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you today. But don't forget that at 10 a.m. We have that interview with Raj Guruswamy, as we know that he has joined the One Nation Party. What is his reasoning? What can we expect? All that will be revealed at 10 a.m. So, we'd like to see you all back at 10 a.m. with that. And from tomorrow, we will resume with our functions and events and upcoming events. Well, until then, it's goodbye from us from this segment. We'll see you back at 10 with that very important interview for today with Raj Guruswamy. Until then, it's goodbye from us. It's been wonderful having your company.